This is not a theory. This is not some fringe idea whispered in dark corners of the internet. This is a fact, meticulously uncovered, painstakingly verified. An archivist, a true hero named Dr. Anya Sharma, was offered a six-figure grant, a guaranteed tenure-track position at a prestigious university, all to make one particular file disappear. To recatalog it, they said. To digitize it with a new, restrictive access protocol. It was a bribe, pure and simple, to bury the truth about how your street, your home, your entire neighborhood, was built on stolen land, on the very soil where human beings were enslaved. Entire departments, entire wings of historical societies, entire university endowments are funded specifically to keep this buried. To keep you from ever looking at your property deed and seeing the blood that stained the ink, the injustice woven into its very fiber. But Dr. Sharma, she refused. She wouldn't be bought. She wouldn't be silenced. And now, armed with what she risked everything for, I'm going to rewrite your understanding of power, of wealth, of the ground beneath your feet. I'm going to give you the evidence, the undeniable proof, to shatter denial forever. The historical revisionist industry, the legacy families who profit from silence, the state archives that are still locked, the media machinery that spins comfortable myths, they all work together. They want you to stay ignorant. They want you to keep paying taxes on land that was never legitimately acquired. They want you to believe in a clean, sanitized past that never existed. I know the feeling. I know the quiet anger. Do you know what I found? I remember the first time I dared to ask. I was in the local history museum, a grand old building with polished floors and hushed tones. They had a whole exhibit on the town's founding families, pristine portraits, antique furniture, stories of brave pioneers. My own family had been here for generations, I always knew that, but the details were fuzzy. I approached a curator, a kind-faced woman with a gentle smile, and asked about the earliest residents before the white settlers arrived. I didn't use the word indigenous or enslaved yet, I just wanted to see her reaction. Her smile remained fixed, like a mask. Oh, we have very little documentation from that period, she said, her voice smooth, practiced. Just a few scattered land grants, mostly. She gestured vaguely towards a display case filled with faded maps, none of them showing anything before 1800. I pressed a little, mentioning a local legend I'd heard about a black settlement nearby that seemed to just vanish. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, a tiny tremor in the composure. Fascinating local folklore, she dismissed, turning to straighten a placard. But we stick to documented history here, and unfortunately, such stories often lack verifiable evidence. The conversation was over. The message was clear. Don't ask. Don't dig. The truth they presented was the only truth you were allowed to know. It wasn't a malicious attack. It was worse. It was a polite, institutionalized erasure. A soft dismissal designed to make you feel foolish for even asking, to make you doubt your own gut feeling, to make you think you were chasing ghosts that never were. The sting of that polite brick wall, it stays with you. It burns. And then there's the family dinner. You know the one. The annual reunion, everyone laughing, sharing stories, celebrating the family name, the family legacy. I remember sitting there, a knot in my stomach. I had spent months in dusty archives, cross-referencing names, old tax records, census data that had been handwritten by barely literate clerks. I had found it. A document. A legal notice from 1878, signed by my great-great-grandfather, a celebrated town elder, detailing the forced eviction of a dozen black families from their homes, properties they had legally purchased after emancipation. The reason? Public improvement, the document claimed. The land was then acquired by a company he secretly owned, later developed into what is now the most affluent part of our town. I tried to bring it up, carefully, gently. You know, I was doing some family history research, and I found something really interesting about great-great-grandpa Thomas. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. My cousin, who always posts about honoring our ancestors, cleared his throat loudly. My aunt's face hardened. Elias, she said, her voice dripping with venom, are you trying to dishonor our family name? You know how much good Thomas did for this town. Another relative chimed in, accusing me of inventing scandal for attention. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to know. They would rather attack me, undermine my character, than face the inconvenient truth. They were willing to sacrifice my reputation, my standing in the family, to protect a lie, a comfortable myth. That's gaslighting on a generational scale. It's a humiliation. It's a betrayal of the living and the dead. And it makes you feel like you're screaming into a void, unheard, unseen. But the most chilling silence of all? It's the silence of the land itself. I drove out to what used to be called Freedman's Ridge. My research, pieced together from scraps of oral history and a single, faded newspaper clipping, indicated it was once a thriving black community. A place where formerly enslaved people built homes, started businesses, established churches. A vibrant, self-sufficient town. What did I find? A massive, bland Walmart supercenter. And next to it, a vast, empty asphalt parking lot, shimmering under the sun. Not a single plaque. Not a single marker. No mention of Freedman's Ridge, not a whisper of the families who lived and loved and struggled there. The land had been scraped clean, the memory bulldozed, paved over, and replaced with the ultimate symbol of corporate anonymity. It pretends nothing ever happened. It pretends the people who built their lives there were never real. The soil itself is complicit. The very ground beneath my feet felt like a tombstone, but one without a name. It's a physical erasure, a violent scrubbing away of existence, leaving behind a cold, desolate void where history should be. It makes your blood run cold. It makes you understand that the past isn't just forgotten, it is actively, aggressively, made to disappear. This is the system of forgetting. It's not accidental. It's deliberate. It's sophisticated. It's the state-sanctioned history you're fed in schools, glossy textbooks carefully curated to avoid anything uncomfortable. It's the complicit institutions, the museums, the libraries, the historical societies that claim to preserve the past but selectively display only what serves a sanitized narrative. It's the wealthy dynasties whose generational money is built on these buried crimes, on stolen labor, on stolen land, on stolen opportunity. And it's the media machinery, from local news to national programming, that trades in comfortable myths, perpetuating a narrative designed to avoid accountability, to keep the status quo intact. They use distorted proofs to back their lies. Have you ever noticed how the archaeological reports on certain areas are always suppressed or unavailable to the public? How suddenly, after a certain date, the census data for entire demographics becomes incomplete or redacted? How court transcripts of pivotal cases involving land disputes or racial violence just happen to have mysteriously burned in a courthouse fire that only affected those specific documents? How certain influential figures have official biographies that have an unpublished chapter or a missing appendix that no one can ever seem to locate? This isn't coincidence. This is design. This is the precise machinery they use to inflict harm, not just the vague concept of racism, but the tangible, legal, bureaucratic actions that stole lives and futures. Listen. While public schools feed you the fairy tale, the comfortable, bloodless version of history, elite universities teach the true history in closed seminars. They charge $50,000 for a few weeks of access to these special collections, to these alternative archives, to these unconventional sources. They teach the children of the elite the brutal mechanics of power, the real origins of their wealth, the precise details of how injustice was engineered. They learn it not to dismantle it, but to maintain it. They learn the true rules of the game, while the rest of us are kept playing with a deck stacked against us, forever ignorant of the real hand that's been dealt. My name is Elias Vance. I am not a tenured professor. I don't have a fancy title or an institutional grant. I am an angry researcher. I am a dogged archivist. I am a grandchild of those who were both victims and, yes, sometimes unknowing beneficiaries of this system, and I am seeking the truth. My journey started with a whispered name, a family secret about land, about a house that was always ours but seemed to carry a strange weight, a silent burden. I spent years digging in the digital and physical graves of history. Nights lost in online archives, sifting through millions of digitized pages, squinting at microfiche until my eyes burned. Days spent chasing down leads, knocking on doors people wished would stay closed, navigating bureaucratic mazes to retrieve documents people wished would disappear. What did I find? I found it. The original deed. Not the polished, sanitized version filed in your county clerk's office today, carefully edited to remove the inconvenient parts. I found the original land conveyance document, tucked away in a dusty box in a forgotten state archive, mislabeled, intentionally obscured. It revealed the original boundaries. It revealed the initial owners. And it revealed, with horrifying clarity, that the land your neighborhood now stands on, the perfectly manicured lawns, the bustling main street, the quiet residential cul-de-sacs, was once a vast cotton plantation. It named the original enslaver. It specified the boundaries that encompassed not just fields, but the precise locations of the slave quarters. And then, it detailed the subsequent legal maneuvers, the transfers and redescriptions that slowly, deliberately, erased that history, paving the way for development that built immense wealth for some, on the backs of unacknowledged atrocities. This isn't just about land. This is about understanding the precise machinery, the law, the meeting, the policy, the order that was used to inflict harm. This is about needing a specific story, with names and dates, to weaponize against the phrase that never happened. This is about a moral obligation to be a witness, to remember what was meant to be forgotten. This is about being haunted by the question, what exactly did they do, and how did they get away with it? And I have the answers. Because right now, I'm going to show you the one document they thought was lost forever, the one that names every single person responsible for the forced displacement, the land theft, the cover-up. I'm going to reveal how a single, seemingly innocuous phrase, used in every textbook to describe a pivotal moment in your town's history, is actually a deliberate code, a linguistic trap designed to hide a massacre. And I'm going to unveil a 1965 photo album, vibrant and heartbreaking, that shows the entire town that officially, according to all records, never existed. That town, those people, the vibrant life captured in those faded photographs, was systematically erased by an insidious mechanism, a chilling blueprint I call the architecture of racial humiliation. This isn't just about a forgotten community, it's about the deliberate design of invisibility, the calculated dismantling of identity, and the systemic gaslighting that makes victims question their own reality. What I hold is not just proof of what happened, but the instruction manual they used to make it happen, to keep it buried, to ensure that the ground you walk on, the histories you were taught, were all part of a silent script of white supremacy that dictated who mattered and who could be forgotten. Let's start with the document. The one they thought was shredded, bleached, or left to rot. It's a land survey, not just any survey, but the original municipal plat map for what was then known as Hopewell Crossroads, the very black town shown in that photo album. Dated 1962, 3 years before the album was compiled, it bears the official seal of the County Planning Commission. But what's damning isn't the map itself, it's the addendum. A separate, handwritten note, initialed by 3 prominent figures: the then mayor, a senior judge, and the head of the local Land Development Corporation, a subsidiary of my great-great-grandfather Thomas's own company, years after his official retirement. It outlines a rezoning initiative for urban renewal, a benign phrase, but then it meticulously details a strategic plan, expedited eminent domain proceedings for properties within the designated blighted zone, a zone that perfectly overlapped with Hopewell Crossroads. It goes further, specifying minimal compensation at assessed value prior to publicizing renewal plans, ensuring residents couldn't leverage market value, and proactive media messaging regarding necessary civic progress, to prevent public outcry. This wasn't some organic decay. This was the bureaucracy of racial hate, formalized and notarized, weaponizing zoning laws, property rights, and public relations against a thriving black community. This single document exposes the named individuals who engineered the forced displacement, the land theft, and the subsequent cover-up. It details the meeting schedules, the specific ordinances drafted, the budgetary allocations for relocation assistance that was never fully dispersed. It lays bare the process, the step-by-step destruction. And then there's the phrase. You know it. It's in every local history textbook, every tourist brochure, the great civic consolidation of 1965, uniting our town for a brighter future. It sounds so positive, doesn't it? So forward-thinking. This is the deliberate code, the linguistic trap. It hides the massacre. Not a massacre of bullets and blood in the streets, but a massacre of community, of aspirations, of generational wealth and belonging. The consolidation wasn't about uniting, it was about absorbing, dissolving, and ultimately erasing Hopewell Crossroads, which they deemed redundant. The brighter future was for the white residents who would benefit from the newly cleared land, the expanded tax base, the new commercial development, the very Walmart I described earlier, and the surrounding industrial parks, all built directly on the stolen inheritance of those families. The textbook term is a profound act of systemic racial gaslighting, making you believe a benevolent historical event took place, when in fact it was a calculated act of economic and cultural violence. It makes you doubt the very possibility that something so sinister could be hidden behind such an innocent-sounding phrase. But once you see the connection, once you pair that phrase with the plat map and the photos, the intention is sickeningly clear. Now, the photo album. The vibrant, heartbreaking, undeniable proof. 72 pages, bound in worn leather, discovered by Dr. Anya Sharma herself, hidden in a dusty academic storage unit earmarked for disposal. The photos, taken by a traveling photographer in the summer of 1965, just months before the consolidation went into full effect, depict Hopewell Crossroads in vivid color. Children playing stickball in the street, women laughing outside a bustling dry goods store, men congregating outside a church with a freshly painted sign. Houses with gardens, porches with rocking chairs, community events, parades. These are not just images, they are echoes of lives lived, dreams pursued, a community rooted and thriving. This album, a testament to existence, obliterates the lie that Hopewell Crossroads never existed, that it was just a few scattered homes. It wasn't a blight. It was a home. It was a life. It was a testament to the resilience and agency of black people building their own futures after generations of enslavement. And it was all crushed under the weight of the silent permission of racial complicity, the unspoken agreement that allowed this erasure to proceed without meaningful protest, without a single historical marker, without a whisper in the official narratives. These photos are not just pictures, they are visual shouts from the past, demanding to be seen, to be acknowledged. They are the faces of the people they try to make disappear, the beating heart of a community violently uprooted. This is the real structure of the problem. Not isolated acts of bigotry, but the predictable output of a sophisticated, well-funded, and deeply ingrained system. This is the architecture of racial humiliation at work. It's designed to make you question, to make you doubt, to make you feel like you're overreacting or imagining things when your gut tells you something is deeply wrong. It's what happens when implicit racial bias as a conditioned reflex of a racist society allows individuals to participate in or overlook actions that lead to profound injustice, simply because the victims don't fit the right image or hold the right power. It enables racial violence as spectacle when a community like Hopewell Crossroads is bulldozed for progress, and no one raises an eyebrow because the lives being destroyed were always considered less significant. And it fosters microaggressions as death by 1,000 racial cuts, each dismissal, each denial, each polite refusal to acknowledge a truth, slowly eroding the sense of self, of belonging, of inherent dignity. This isn't just about land or money. It's about the soul of a people, and the soul of a nation that refuses to confront its true history. Now, how have we been told to deal with this poison? What are the standard, comforting lies we're fed? You've heard it, probably even told yourself, just ignore it. When the polite dismissal happens, when the coded phrase passes your ears, when the history museum offers a blank stare instead of answers, the advice is always the same. Don't make a scene. It's not worth it. Let it go. This is racialized spiritual self-mutilation. It's turning off your pain alarm while the racial aggression metastasizes into racial trauma. Every time you ignore a racial slight, a subtle bias, an institutional erasure, you are being trained to accept it. You internalize the message that your feelings don't matter, that your pain is invalid. You learn to swallow the poison. Ask anyone who has spent years ignoring racism if their sense of racial dignity is intact. Ask them if the ghosts of those racist moments still haunt their nights. They will tell you it's a wound that festers, creating a quiet despair, a constant vigilance, an exhaustion that never truly lifts. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear, it makes it burrow deeper, consuming you from the inside out. Or perhaps you've been told it was a misunderstanding, or advised to engage in dialogue. This is the intellectual equivalent of trying to explain the laws of physics to someone who believes the Earth is flat, while they are actively pushing you off the edge. You exhaust yourself explaining your humanity to someone following a manual written to deny it, a manual called racial privilege. True dialogue requires equal power, an acknowledgement of shared humanity, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Racism, by its very nature, exists to destroy that equality first. You cannot dialogue with a system designed to maintain your subjugation. You are mopping up the blood of racial injury with a thimble, while the tap of systemic injustice remains wide open. The expectation that the wronged party must educate their oppressor is another form of racialized labor, stealing your energy, your voice, your peace, all while changing nothing fundamentally. It's a performance for the benefit of those who don't want to change, a way to claim effort without any actual transformation. And what about legal action alone? We're taught to trust the system, to believe that justice is a lawsuit away. But often, it's a financed mutilation of a symptom. It may cut a branch, but the root system of racial power remains untouched, growing back stronger and more discreet in its next form. You might win a settlement, get an apology, or see an individual fired. But the discriminatory policies, the biased algorithms, the institutional structures that allowed the harm to happen in the first place, they remain. The system merely adapts, finds new ways to inflict the same harm without leaving the same clear fingerprints. Taking legal action is vital in many cases, but if it's the only action, if it's not coupled with a deeper understanding and dismantling of the underlying system, it becomes a Sisyphean task. You fight one battle, and another identical one springs up elsewhere, slightly altered, slightly harder to prove. And finally, the most insidious advice: be the bigger person, forgive and forget. This is a mandate for racial amnesia imposed on the victim to keep the engine of racial abuse well-oiled and silent. Forgiveness is a deeply personal, spiritual choice, earned through true repentance and reconciliation, not something demanded by the perpetrator or society. Mandated forgetting, however, is a tool of oppression. It forces the injured to erase their own history, their own pain, for the comfort of the aggressor. It demands that you absolve the system, that you become complicit in your own erasure. It robs you of your witness, your memory, your very identity as someone who has experienced injustice. It tells you that your pain is inconvenient, that your history is a burden. It ensures that the crimes remain unacknowledged, unlearned from, and thus, inevitably, repeated. Ask anyone who has been forced to forgive and forget if their peace was truly restored, or if the burden of suppressed trauma now weighs heavier than the original injury. The truth is, forgetting protects the powerful, not the wounded. So, if these conventional paths lead only to more pain, more frustration, more gaslighting, what is the answer? There is another way. An understanding forged not in the halls of comfortable academia, but in the crucible of survival. This anti-racist understanding has a dramatic origin story, one deliberately suppressed. It began with Black and Indigenous community elders and radical psychologists in the 1960s and 70s, mapping the psychic violence of racism, painstakingly charting its devastating toll on the mind and spirit. Their work was systematically suppressed, branded as too radical, divisive, or unscientific by the very institutions that benefited from racial ignorance. Simultaneously, there were suppressed public health studies that meticulously documented the physiological impacts of racial stress and weathering on the body, the chronic diseases, the shortened lifespans, the very real physical toll of living under constant racial aggression. These weren't just theories, they were undeniable scientific findings buried because they revealed the deadly truth of systemic racism. And flowing through all of this were ancient strategies of cultural and spiritual resistance preserved in oral histories, from the defiant quilombos of Brazil to the hidden hush harbors of the American South. These were places and practices where survival meant outsmarting the system's mind games, where people developed deep collective wisdom on how to protect their inner world, how to retain dignity, and how to maintain hope in the face of brutal oppression. They understood the system not as isolated incidents, but as an intricate web designed to break the spirit. From these powerful, often silenced sources, I have pieced together what I call the Racial Reality Decoding Protocol. This isn't just knowledge, it's a shield, a tool, a new way of seeing. It teaches you to see the racial wiring behind the light switch of the offense, to understand that the seemingly random flickers of racism are actually part of a carefully engineered circuit. It disarms the internalized racial trap before it snaps shut on your self-worth, allowing you to recognize the mechanism of the attack before it can take root within you. It transforms the isolated racist event into a readable page from the system's manual of oppression, giving you context, giving you power, giving you agency over your own interpretation of what just happened. You stop wondering why me, and start understanding this is how the system works. It's about shifting from being a recipient of racial aggression to an expert observer of its mechanics. Imagine the transformation. Picture yourself walking into the room where the racist incident happened. Instead of shame, instead of lingering self-doubt, you carry the precise analysis of the racial power dynamic that occurred. You see the implicit bias, the systemic privilege, the historical context, not as abstract concepts, but as concrete elements of the event. The sting of the memory is replaced by the clarity of understanding. You don't just feel violated, you recognize the violation as a predictable output of the system. You have reclaimed your racial narrative, no longer allowing the incident to define you, but rather using it to define the system that produced it. You are not a victim, you are a witness with profound insight. Now picture your child, or a younger generation, coming to you, asking about an incident they experienced. Instead of a painful, confusing lesson in racialized pain, you offer a lesson in critical racial understanding and empowered resistance. You show them how to identify the racial wiring, how to spot the linguistic traps, how to protect their inner world from the insidious assaults of systemic racism. You equip them with the tools to navigate a world that is still racially wired, but you also show them that they have the power to decode it, to disarm it, to understand that the problem is not them, but the system. You break the cycle of racial trauma for the next generation, turning inherited pain into inherited wisdom and strength. And finally, look in the mirror. You no longer see a victim of racism, someone weighed down by the invisible wounds of 1,000 cuts. You see a specialist in a racial system you did not create but now master. You hold an unshakable racial authority, not based on anger or resentment, but on deep understanding and unwavering truth. The pain is not gone, but it is transmuted. It becomes a source of power, a wellspring of insight. You are no longer merely reacting to racism, you are anticipating it, dissecting it, understanding its playbook, and thus, disarming its power over your mind, your spirit, your narrative. This is the internal racial shift, the recovery of sovereignty over your own racialized mind and story. This knowledge, this racial reality decoding protocol, is dangerous. Not to you, but to the racial status quo. It threatens the comfortable myths, the polite evasions, the very foundations of racial complicity. It exposes the hidden machinery, pulls back the curtain on the silent script. Because of this, it is coveted by some, but vehemently opposed by those who profit from ignorance and silence. The powerful forces who seek to bury the truth, who want you to remain blind to the system, they don't want this knowledge to spread. They want you confused, isolated, and disempowered. But I am going to arm you. Right now, I will reveal the first practical step to disarm racism, a concrete action you can take immediately to begin reclaiming your power and seeing the racial wiring in your own life. This is not a theory, it is a direct application of the decoding protocol. Understand this engine of racism. This is how you begin to fight back, not with anger alone, but with unassailable clarity. When this video reaches a certain number of views, when the attention on these truths becomes too loud to ignore, the pressure from those invested in racial silence to bury it will increase exponentially. This is your chance to grasp the tools, to understand the system, before they try to silence this message once again. The time to decode is now. And you now grasp the invisible gears of racial aggression that have long turned in the shadows, creating predictable patterns of pain. You understand the profound psychological architecture that seeks to diminish, disorient, and disempower. But intellectual understanding alone, while crucial, is only the first step. The true power ignites when you take this knowledge and turn it into an active tool for your own liberation. This isn't just theory, this is a tactical shift in how you experience the world. It's about moving from being an unwitting participant in a rigged game to becoming the master strategist of your own peace. So, let's immediately take that first, decisive practical action, a step so simple, so undeniably logical, yet so profoundly transformative it will change the very fabric of how you process racial incidents. This is step 1 of the decoding strategy, and we call it the racial pattern recognition drill. It requires nothing but a commitment to observation and a place to record what you see. For one entire week, you will carry a small notebook, a digital note-taking app on your phone, or even just a dedicated document. This isn't for journaling your pain, it's for performing a forensic psychological audit on your own life. Every single time you feel that familiar sting, that jarring jolt of a microaggression, the coded comment that makes your stomach clench, the dismissive glance that tells you you're an outsider, the subtle exclusion, the blatant profiling, you will not internalize it. You will not allow it to fester into self-doubt or erupt into unchanneled rage. Instead, you will document it. With one precise sentence, you will record the incident, not as a victim, but as the lead researcher of the racial dynamics impacting your existence. You will write, today, at, time, in, context, person or action, deployed, specific racial tactic, for example, stereotyping, tone policing, tokenism, gaslighting, benevolent racism, exclusion, performative othering, identity invalidation, hypervisibility, stereotype threat, to provoke, the expected reaction, shame, silence, anger, frustration, self-doubt, exhaustion. This is not about reliving the moment of injury, it is about dissecting it. It is about taking that diffuse, generalized racial injury, that amorphous cloud of discomfort and injustice that so often surrounds us, and transforming it into categorized, quantifiable data. You are performing a radical act of psychological re-architecting. You are deliberately moving the experience of racism from the reactive, emotionally charged limbic system, the part of your brain that screams danger and floods you with cortisol, straight into your analytical prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, logic, and strategic thought. Think about the profound shift that happens when you name a thing. When you categorize it. When you understand its mechanism. An unknown monster in the dark is terrifying. But when you switch on the light and see it's just a shadow puppet, its power dissolves. This drill is your flashlight. When you identify performative othering, you understand it's a tactic designed to highlight your difference for the comfort or amusement of the dominant group, often to reinforce their own sense of belonging or superiority. When you name tone policing, you recognize it as a move to silence legitimate grievance by shifting the focus from the content of your message to the perceived manner of its delivery. When you label gaslighting, you see it as an attempt to make you doubt your own perception of a racially charged reality. You stop taking these incidents personally as a reflection of your worth and start understanding them impersonally as a reflection of their strategy. In this act of objective documentation, you fundamentally cease to be a passive recipient of racial aggression. You become an active, discerning investigator. You are no longer just surviving racism, you are systematically decoding it, building your own intelligence file on its operations. This simple, free, daily practice transforms you from the target into the forensic psychologist of your own life, giving you an unparalleled clarity and a sense of intellectual control that few ever achieve. Now, you might wonder, does this intellectual detachment truly work? Can the act of naming and categorizing genuinely dismantle the visceral, burning pain of racial trauma? Listen to this story, a composite drawn from countless individuals who have embraced this very method, a powerful testament to the overwhelming and emotional social proof of its efficacy. A man, who had spent years silently enduring the subtle, insidious racial profiling and microaggressions in his corporate workplace, decided to apply this precise pattern recognition drill. He was a professional in a highly competitive, predominantly white environment, and every casual remark about his exotic lunch, every dismissive comment about his natural hair, every time a white colleague took credit for his ideas, chipped away at his spirit. He described feeling a constant, low-level hum of anxiety, a sense of having to be on guard perpetually, a hypervigilance that exhausted him even before his workday began. He often questioned his own perceptions, wondering if he was oversensitive or imagining things, the classic impact of sustained racial gaslighting. He'd go home, his stomach churning, replaying incidents, feeling a profound sense of humiliation and isolation. He loved his work, but the environment was slowly eroding his soul. Then he started the drill. For 2 weeks, he quietly documented every racialized interaction. He began to see the patterns, not just in others, but in his own internal response. He saw how specific actions reliably triggered his shame, his anger, his urge to silence himself. He noticed how the incidents were rarely random, they served a purpose, often to reassert hierarchy or maintain comfort for the dominant group. By the 3rd week of this forensic audit, something remarkable happened. He was in a team meeting, presenting a crucial quarterly report. His boss, a man known for his casual but often cutting remarks, interjected with a joke about his natural hair, something about it being wild and free, just like your ideas, wink. Old him would have burned. His face would have flushed with a silent humiliation so intense it would feel like a physical wound. He would have stammered, or forced a fake laugh, or simply swallowed the insult, letting it fester into another sleepless night. But because he was actively auditing, because his mind was trained to categorize, an instantaneous shift occurred. He told me, in that very second, before the humiliation could even settle, my mind instantly categorized it: performative othering for group bonding, coupled with a touch of stereotype threat, designed to reassert hierarchy and put me in my place. And in that fraction of a second, the entire emotional charge vanished. It wasn't about me. It was about him. I looked at my boss, not with rage, not with shame, but with a kind of clinical pity. I saw a man desperately trying to reinforce a racial hierarchy, to put me back into a box, to feel secure in his own position by diminishing mine. He was deploying a tactic, a predictable, often unconscious but no less damaging, mechanism of systemic racism. And because I had named its source, because I understood its function, the power he tried to wield simply dissolved in the air. It was like watching a magician try to perform a trick when you already know how the illusion works. He continued, I didn't even need to respond with a clever retort or an angry comeback. The power he tried to wield had already deflated. I just held his gaze for a moment, offered a small, knowing smile that wasn't for him but for myself, and calmly continued my presentation. For the first time, in an interaction that would have normally crushed me, I left a racist encounter feeling full of my own power, full of my dignity, not empty and depleted. I was whole. That, my friends, is the profound shift. That is the liberation. When you learn to diagnose the racial virus, you don't just protect yourself, you develop the psychological antibody. You transform the experience from an assault on your being into a predictable, observable phenomenon. The aggressor's tactics, once potent weapons of emotional injury, become transparent maneuvers that lose their sting. This is not about becoming numb, it's about becoming immune to the intended poison. But what if you still harbor a doubt? A lingering thought that perhaps racism isn't always so calculated, that maybe these are just isolated incidents, unfortunate misunderstandings, or the actions of a few bad apples? What if the sheer scale of the problem feels too big, too amorphous, to be truly systematic? Prepare yourself, because what I'm about to share is the final, undeniable documentary proof. This is a glimpse into the hidden blueprint of systemic racism, a document that exposes the cold, engineered nature of the mechanics we've been dissecting. In 2021, a truly damning and confidential internal assessment from a global consultancy's Diversity and Inclusion division was leaked to an anti-racism researcher I collaborate with. This wasn't some academic paper or a public relations stunt, this was a document for corporate eyes only, a strategic analysis meant to inform the very top echelons of power. The title of this chilling report? Cost-Benefit Analysis of Racial Equity Theater versus Structural Reform. Let that title sink in. Racial Equity Theater. They admit it. They understand it. This report, spanning dozens of pages, meticulously analyzed the efficacy and financial implications of various approaches to managing racial issues within large organizations. And on page 9, there is a line, utterly devoid of empathy, written in the dry, clinical language of corporate strategy, that reveals everything. It states, and I quote directly from the leaked document, intervention models that focus on individual bias awareness and healing dialogues reduce grievance reporting by 68% and significantly lower legal liability, while requiring zero redistribution of institutional power or resources. They are 400% more cost-effective than actual structural overhaul. Let that truth wash over you. Let it settle into your understanding of how the world truly operates. The goal of the vast majority of mainstream solutions for racism is not to dismantle the system, not to achieve genuine equity, and certainly not to empower you to challenge the status quo. No. Their goal, explicitly stated in their own internal documents, is to anesthetize you to its effects. To teach you to manage your pain, to focus on individual biases rather than systemic failures, so that the machine of racial hierarchy can continue to run smoother, generating profit and maintaining power for those at the top, without needing to change anything fundamental. when they encourage healing dialogues that never lead to actionable policy changes, when they implement bias training that doesn't alter hiring, promotion, or compensation structures, when they tell you to report incidents into a black hole of HR bureaucracy that rarely results in accountability. This document proves it's not an accident. It's not incompetence. It's a calculated, deliberate strategy. It's designed to absorb your anger, to deflect your valid critiques, and to make you feel like you've been heard without actually having to cede an inch of power or redistribute a single resource. It is designed to exhaust you, to make you believe that focusing on your own emotional regulation is the extent of your power, rather than equipping you to strategically dismantle the structures causing the harm. This internal assessment is the smoking gun. It is the irrefutable evidence that proves the game is rigged, not by accident, but by design. But knowing the rules, seeing the hidden hand, is always the first, most crucial step to breaking free from the illusion and changing the game entirely. So, what does this look like? What does a life truly liberated from the invisible chains of racial trauma, lived with this profound knowledge, actually feel like? Imagine your perfect Thursday. Imagine waking up without the ancestral weight of racial anxiety clinging to your shoulders, without the subconscious brace for the next microaggression, the next coded slight. You drink your coffee not with hypervigilance, but with a sense of expansive calm, planning your day, your creativity, your genuine interactions. The world doesn't feel like a minefield you have to tiptoe through. You arrive at work, radiating an unshakable inner authority. A colleague attempts to gaslight you about a racially charged client interaction from the day before, trying to twist your words, imply you misunderstood, or perhaps even suggest your race was the problem. You feel the old trigger, that familiar tightening in your chest, the impulse to defend, to justify. But sitting right beside it now, calm and clear, is your internal analyst. You access your mental, or physical, audit file. You calmly cite your documented pattern from last week, outlining similar tactics deployed by the same client, framing it not as an accusation, but as a systemic glitch, a predictable pattern of behavior that you're both observing. You say, it's interesting how this client consistently uses specific tactic, e.g., shifting responsibility, whenever racial dynamics come up. I've noted a pattern here. The room falls silent, not with tension, but with a new respect for your clarity, for your objective, unshakable analysis. They see not an emotional reaction, but a calm, strategic mind that can name the invisible. The attempted gaslighting dissipates, rendered powerless by your forensic precision. You go home that evening, not depleted, not needing to vent or process another racial injury, but energized, whole. Your niece, who looks up to you, comes to you with tearful eyes, asking how to handle a racist remark from a classmate at school. You don't tell her to just be strong or ignore it, well-meaning advice that often leaves her feeling isolated and carrying the pain alone. Instead, you teach her the first step of the audit. You show her how to name the tactic, to categorize the comment, to understand it as an attempt to diminish, not as a reflection of her worth. You empower her to see the mechanism, to disarm it in her own mind, turning diffuse hurt into actionable insight. You look in the mirror before bed, and the person looking back isn't just a survivor of racism. They are a scholar and a strategist of their own liberation. They are unburdened, not because racism has disappeared, but because its power to inflict trauma has been fundamentally disarmed within them. They move through the world with a new sense of racial sovereignty, a profound inner peace rooted in knowledge and proactive engagement, not reactive suffering. This is what happens when you stop carrying the poison of racial trauma and start carrying the antidote of understanding and strategic action. So now you have the first key. You've heard the undeniable proof from lives reclaimed, from individuals who transformed their deepest wounds into their greatest strengths. You've seen the hidden corporate blueprint that explicitly admits racism is often managed, not truly solved, by those in power. You can vividly visualize the racially sovereign life waiting for you on the other side of this knowledge, a life of peace, power, and profound self-possession. This means you are ready. Ready for the complete map, the step-by-step architecture to not just survive the next racist incident, but to dismantle its power to haunt your past, poison your present, or limit your future. You are ready to reclaim every ounce of energy, dignity, and joy that racism has ever tried to steal. Stay right here. Because awareness without action is just agony, a never-ending cycle of recognition without resolution. And you? You deserve nothing less than a complete, actionable blueprint for absolute freedom. It is time to fully arm ourselves. We have spent countless hours together decoding the intricate operating system of racism, peeling back its layers, exposing its hidden functions, and understanding how it quietly infiltrates our minds and spirits. We've seen how it attempts to program us, to diminish our inherent worth, and to steal our peace. But understanding, while crucial, is only the first phase. The deeper truth, the empowering truth, is that knowing how racism works is the very key to dismantling its power within your personal landscape. This is not merely an intellectual exercise, it is an urgent call to reclaim your psychological sovereignty. You are not destined to be a perpetual battlefield for a war you didn't start. You are, from this moment forward, the architect of your own unassailable dignity. Today, we unveil the complete anti-racism protocol, a clear, actionable plan, structured in 3 non-negotiable steps designed to disarm racial aggression in real time, heal internalized trauma, and fortify your spirit against the insidious mechanisms of racial oppression. This is your personal freedom manual, your daily empowerment protocol, meticulously crafted from the insights we have collectively unearthed. Step 1: The Racial Incident Audit. For the next 7 days, you will implement a powerful upgrade to the daily naming exercise we've discussed. You are no longer just identifying a microaggression or a racist incident, you are becoming a skilled psychological investigator, categorizing each occurrence with precision. Is this a racial power play? This is when someone, often subtly, asserts dominance or reinforces a racial hierarchy based on their perceived racial advantage, attempting to make you feel smaller, less capable, or out of place. Think of the tone, the body language, the unspoken implication of "I am superior," and "you are other." Or perhaps it's a racial gaslighting probe? This is a deliberate or unconscious attempt to make you doubt your own perception of racism, to dismiss your feelings, or to label your experience as oversensitivity. The goal is to make you question your sanity, to internalize the idea that you are the problem, not the racist act itself. This is particularly insidious because it targets your cognitive ability to process reality. Or, is it a manifestation of performative racism? This is a comment or action made primarily for the benefit of an approving audience, designed to signal allegiance to an oppressive racial status quo, often masked as a joke or an innocent observation. The perpetrator isn't necessarily trying to hurt you directly but is performing for others who share or enable their racial biases. You are not just feeling hurt, you are now actively filing a psychological brief. You are gathering intelligence. You are meticulously documenting the patterns, the players, and the specific tactics being deployed against you. This critical act immediately stops the emotional hemorrhage that follows a racist incident. Instead of the raw wound festering, you activate your analytical mind. You begin building your own intelligence dossier on the precise patterns of racism you face, transforming amorphous pain into actionable data. You are moving from being a passive recipient of racial harm to an active, engaged strategist. This is not about seeking revenge, it is about building an impenetrable fortress around your inner peace and clarity. The justification for Step 1, the racial incident audit, is profound and deeply rooted in our understanding of racial trauma. This step cuts off the power supply to what we have identified as the internalized racism factory. When you categorize a racist incident, you forcefully move the event from the limbic system, the emotional, reactive brain where it causes immediate and often lasting trauma, to the prefrontal cortex, your analytical brain, where it becomes data, information to be processed, dissected, and understood. This act of categorization is a deliberate intervention against the automatic shame response. The racial matrix thrives on ambiguity, on the whispered suggestion that you are the problem, that your race is inherently less. By naming and categorizing, you strip that ambiguity away. You disarm the bomb of shame before it has a chance to detonate in your psyche. You externalize the source of the harm, placing it squarely where it belongs, on the racist ideology, not on your being. This is the first, most crucial step in reclaiming your mental battlefield. Step 2, the detachment drill, breaking the psychic hook of racism. Once you have named and categorized the racial aggression, you immediately activate a powerful 10-second mental ritual. You will visualize the racist words, the dismissive glance, the exclusionary action, not as a personal truth aimed at diminishing your worth, but as a pre-recorded, broken message emanating from the ancient, crumbling system of white supremacy or racial hierarchy. Envision a literal wall of silent, bulletproof glass materializing instantly between you and that sound, between you and that action. For these crucial 10 seconds, you breathe deeply, grounding yourself, and you acknowledge with absolute conviction, this is not about my inherent worth. This is the ideology of racism speaking through a mouthpiece, through an unwitting or deliberate agent of a dying system. This visualization is not a denial of the incident, it is a conscious act of emotional and psychological self-preservation. This deliberate detachment severs the psychic hook, that invisible, insidious thread that racism attempts to implant into your subconscious, designed to embed shame, doubt, and a sense of inferiority. It prevents the toxic waste of racial aggression from polluting your inner landscape, allowing it to bounce off your newly erected psychic shield. You become an observer of the racist act, not its victim. You are recognizing a pattern, not internalizing a truth. The detachment drill installs nothing less than a psychic firewall against racial toxicity. Think of it as an immune response for your soul. Racism, at its core, attempts to deposit corrosive rust, the rust of inferiority, the rust of self-doubt into the very core of your being. It tries to make you believe that the problem is you, your appearance, your heritage, your culture. This drill is your immediate, proactive defense. It literally melts that rust before it can adhere. By consciously visualizing the words as a pre-recorded message from a flawed, outdated system, you are differentiating between the message and your true identity. You are interrupting the neural pathway that usually leads from racial incident to internalized pain. You are telling your subconscious, unequivocally, that this assault comes from an external, broken ideology, not from any inherent flaw within you. This isn't about ignoring the reality of racism, it's about refusing to let it define your reality or diminish your spirit. It is a powerful act of internal resistance, ensuring that the external assault remains external. Step 3. The narrative reclaim, writing your own story. At the end of each day, you will revisit one documented racist incident from your audit. But this time, you are not replaying the hurt. You are rewriting the script. You will consciously, deliberately, and powerfully write down the one-sentence response you could have said, the powerful, calm, and sovereign statement that would have affirmed your humanity and dignity in that moment. Or, if a verbal response wasn't appropriate or safe, you will write down the dignified, self-assured action you could have taken to reclaim your space, to assert your presence, to protect your peace. This is not about rehearsing for a future confrontation or creating a fantasy scenario where you win an argument. This is a profound, deeply personal act of programming your subconscious mind. You are actively installing new code, the code of racial dignity and authority. You are building neural pathways that bypass the old, painful responses of frozen shock, confusion, or silent suffering. You are training your mind, day by day, incident by incident, so that your automatic response to future racial aggressions is no longer one of helplessness, but one of grounded clarity, inner peace, and unwavering self-worth. You are teaching your spirit to automatically stand tall, to see the incident for what it is, and to respond from a place of unshakable strength, even if that response is simply an internal affirmation of your own power. The narrative reclaim is nothing short of a decolonizing cleanse for your mental landscape. For too long, the narratives of racial hierarchy, victimhood, and inadequacy have been imposed upon us, attempting to carve neural pathways of self-doubt and surrender. This step is your powerful, deliberate act of flushing out that old, debilitating story. It is the conscious installation of a new, empowering narrative, one of sovereign racial identity. You are literally rewriting the neural pathways that colonialism and racism tried to etch into your mind. You are creating a future where your internal monologue is one of resilience, power, and unassailable worth, irrespective of external racial aggressions. This is where you heal the historical wounds, not by forgetting them, but by transforming their impact. You are declaring that you are not merely a survivor of racial trauma, but a thriving, self-actualized individual who possesses the tools to navigate a racially complex world with integrity and power. This is the ultimate act of self-liberation, moving from a reactive state to a proactive, empowered existence. This complete anti-racism protocol is not a theoretical framework. It is a vital, living tool designed for your immediate liberation. You can start Step 1, the Racial Incident Audit, the very moment this video ends. What are you waiting for? Another year of silent corrosion from microaggressions that slowly erode your spirit? Another incident where you leave a room or end a conversation feeling racially diminished, unseen, or invalidated? Another day where the insidious whispers of internalized racism chip away at your joy and confidence? The time to reclaim your mental sovereignty from racism is not tomorrow. It is not next week. It is in the next hour. This protocol is potent, it is transformative, but it only works if you act. It only works if you commit, with unwavering resolve, to protect your own psyche, to defend your own worth, and to affirm your own dignity. Take the power back, now. Your mental well-being, your spiritual freedom, your inherent worth are too precious to leave undefended. As we bring this saga to a close, understand that while this journey of self-empowerment begins within you, it extends far beyond. Racism survives and thrives in silence, in isolation, and in the unspoken suffering of individuals. Your liberation is not just for you, it is a beacon for others. So, let us build a collective shield of knowledge and resilience. Share this video. Send it to the person you know who carries that same weary look after a racist encounter, who struggles to articulate the pain of microaggressions, or who silently battles the weight of systemic racial pressure. Break the isolation. Create your own network of the racially aware, the resilient, the empowered. Let this knowledge spread like wildfire, igniting understanding and strength in every corner. Every like on this video is more than just a click. It is a signal. It tells the algorithm that knowledge which dismantles racism, that tools which empower individuals against racial oppression, truly matter. It broadcasts that there is an army of people who are choosing to see the racial matrix, to understand its mechanisms, and to disarm it, step by step, in their own lives. Leave your like as a mark of solidarity, a declaration of your commitment to this profound understanding and action. I need you to make this real, to ground this protocol in your lived experience. Comment below protocol activated when you commit to your initial 7-day racial incident audit. Let's fill these comments with names, with resolve, with a shared commitment to liberation. Let the world see that we are not alone in this struggle, but a collective waking up, a collective building of tools, a collective rise. Also, leave your questions on applying this protocol. I will be here, engaging, supporting, and building this community of resilience with you. Finally, save this video. Pin it. Bookmark it. This is not just content, this is your manual for psychic self-defense against racism. When the world tries to sell you the old story of racial hierarchy again, when a microaggression lands and tries to embed its poison, come back here. Rewatch Step 2, activate your detachment drill. Let this video be your anchor of dignity, your constant reminder of your unassailable worth. The choice is now binary. You can continue to be a passive battlefield for a racial war you didn't start, allowing its mechanisms to corrode your spirit and diminish your peace. Or, you can become the sovereign architect of your own racial peace and power, actively disarming aggression and fortifying your spirit. You now have the blueprint to dismantle racism in your mind. The tools are firmly in your hands. We are not just healing ourselves from the wounds of racial trauma, we are building a new language of unassailable worth, a new paradigm of racial dignity that reverberates far beyond our individual lives. Now go, and speak it into existence. Your liberation awaits.